friends, welcome to episode 188 of Storyteller Conclave. This is a show all about helping you run the best tabletop role-playing game that you can, whether you're a new storyteller or dungeon master learning the craft, or an experienced storyteller looking to take your game to the next level. I'm Sara.
And I'm Rob.
How we doing, Rob?
Not too bad, actually.
Yeah.
Good dinner.
Good dinner, good company.
Yeah.
Some of your family came over.
Yeah, oddly.
and-
It was kind of a squeeze in at the last moment, but it was, my nephews were like, I need to talk hardware about stuff because Nana wants me to talk about my Christmas stuff. And I'm like, what are you thinking? Oh, like a HOTAS setup and maybe VR headset. And I'm like, yeah, come on over to the house.
Yeah. It's like we have some opinions, we have some experience.
Yeah.
So I had my game last weekend.
You did.
Now we had a few days to sleep on it. How do you think it went?
I think it went great. I really did. I thought that it went great. I thought your execution was fantastic. It was, again, neat to have helped you and knew the plot. Because we talked right after show.
Right after show. I was really super stressed out about the show. And I think I mentioned it during the show. I was stressed out about the amount of work I still had to do before I got before I was ready to do things that weekend. And you were like, I feel bad because I can't, what can I do to help? And I'm like, well, you can't paint minis for me. You can't build my terrain for me. And I'm thinking, like, the only other thing I've got to do is I've got to write some plot. And I'm like, all right, look. Here's the thing. I'm going to tell you the plot of the game.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to tell you everything.
The plot of this specific episode.
I'm going to tell you because it doesn't pertain to your character directly, you know. I'm just going to tell you all the things I've got up my sleeve for Sean's character.
Mm-hmm.
And I need you to add vicissitudes to it. I need you to add undulations, twists, if you will. Just tell me how to make it more interesting, because it's pretty linear.
Here's
you find a clue, it leads you here, and then there are, there's cultists.
Yeah.
Essentially. And you're like, what if, and we sat there and talked for probably like 2 hours directly after recording last Wednesday.
Yep.
And so you got to see all the plot, all the planning, what the plot was, what you suggested I add into it, what I turned your suggestions into, and then how I executed them.
Yeah. And it was still 100%. Well, I mean, without a doubt, the telegraphing that you had for the players was good. Mm-hmm. It didn't put out your cards too quickly. You were able to disclose aspects of the plot in a neat way, and in a lot of ways, like I said, it was like I had designed the module and handed it to you, and said, "Here, go run this."
Yeah, okay, I can see that.
Because I gave you all of the broad strokes, and you obviously you gave me the plot runs, but like at the same time, it was all there waiting. And then I got to just sit back and watch it from my character perspective. And I think that's the second part of it is, how do you think I played in it?
It was funny watching you feign surprise at certain plot twists, because you were like, what? That's what's really going on? I mean, shut up. You told me to do it that way.
I did. But it was neat letting the other players explore it without saying a word.
Yeah.
That was fun, because I could sit from my side and watch them put the pieces together.
And there was a couple moments, too, in there where a couple of my players picked up on a subtle thing that I never made explicit, like the initials MD, and drew that line to its inevitable conclusion
to
where that was going, what Daedric Prince they were actually worshipping and stuff.
Yep.
And so, yeah, it's neat. And I felt it went really good.
No, I thought it went great.
I got to do... The cool thing I liked about this game was that it involved running another gala party at some noble's estate, which is absolutely Sean's character's playground. Last time I ran one of these, we ran it in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. And there was a particular way that the information gathering at the party went. We had a stealth team that was rifling through that noble's crap while everybody was occupied with the party. And we had you guys on the floor talking, getting FaceTime with nobles and trying to get information that way. And so we did the exact same thing this time around, but I ran it in Savage Worlds. And I thought it was really neat seeing how it ran in Savage Worlds versus how it ran in 5th edition D&D.
Yeah, vastly different.
And I gotta say, one of my biggest joys with how it happened, and I talked to Sean afterwards too. We were up until 2 a.m. that night, just talking, like lying in bed, but talking.
Right.
And we were both really excited about how it ran in Savage Worlds. In 5th edition D&D, the numbers were so high. That like I think Sean's character was like plus 12 to persuasion checks or something like that.
It felt effortless.
Yeah, effortless for him to roll in there and just do nothing but 20 plus in all these persuasion checks. But this time around, you guys actually technically failed the challenge.
We did. We totally did.
You needed
on the front of the house
12 total successes, and you got 10. So it wasn't by much.
Yeah, 3 people only were able to pull out 10. It was a fighter, the cleric, and the bard. If you want to go classes,
to
kind of explain the situation. Yeah, unlike the bard who got who should have been able to get like 30 successes on their own,
and the sorcerer. You guys actually had 4 people in front of the house. But
sorry, Tristan.
In Savage Worlds, though, first off, we were playing out action cards, and if your action card came up as a club, you had a complication. And you had a bunch of clubs.
I did.
Sean said it was 11 of 12. I think you guys were short by 1.
Okay.
I want to say it was 10.
No,
but...
it was less than that because we had one that retracted, that pulled off at the end.
And it was the very first thing that happened.
Okay.
But
either way.
Either way, so you had a bad run of luck because basically if you got a club as your action card, there was some sort of a complication that made it more difficult for you. So you were at -2 to your rolls, and if you failed that roll, you get essentially ejected from the party.
Yeah. So you're spending bennies to get new cards constantly.
Yeah, and it made it a real nail biter. And then like when you bennied your card away. You got you got another club, so you're like, well,
I'm not going to do something, so I'll support someone instead.
Right, so you go to support them instead, and that, I mean, it made for a great, like, there was a lot more interaction than just roll and hope for the highest.
Yep. It added to give fate and flavor to the role play.
And the fact that you guys didn't just crush it straight out of the gate, I think was very heartening.
Second team, though, totally different story.
It felt difficult, it felt intense, and you guys felt the weight of those rolls rather than just being like, oh, our bard's here, we win.
Exactly.
So,
yep.
That is my game summary. I think it went extraordinarily well.
I think it went well. One of the interesting things about that ties kind of into our last 101 was we talked about what's the linchpin of this when we were in our discussions, like what's the one thing that this is all tied to. And you had a hard time kind of thinking about it, and then we finally figured out what that thing was. Like it wasn't the insinuated event, it wasn't that we have cultists, it was what was going on with that situation. And I said, okay, so when that's removed, does it all fall apart? And the answer was yes. It was like, okay, let's now wrap. How do we wrap around that? How do we create MacGuffins that move within that?
Yep.
And so again, we had we have a single situation, this person that is unknown. And the moment they are known, it changes everything.
Yep.
It moves the whole story. So using that as the reference point, what do we need to do to get there?
Yep.
And it worked fantastically. Like we were able to talk through it pretty quickly.
Yep. It's like the central pole of a tent just holding everything up.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so coming off of our last one, when we were talking about MacGuffins are just an object or a device that is significant and necessary to the plot motivation for the characters, but it itself is insignificant and unimportant. It's technically an irrelevant thing, just like the ball in football. It's kind of, if you just put it on the field, it's irrelevant.
Yeah.
But the moment it's in the hands of a player, it is the most relevant thing on that field because it's affecting everything. Whereas the linchpin is the essential component that the whole thing is wrapped around. Without it and that is the rivalry. There has to be 2 teams on the field having the game.
Yep.
Otherwise, the game doesn't exist, right? Yeah, you can have a ball on the field, you can have a bunch of people throwing it around, it's just catch at that point. But the moment that there is a rivalry between those 2 teams, you now have a football game. Everything else, because again, Blood Bowl has different rules than football, but you know exactly what they're doing.
Yeah.
Right? So there's different ways to do that. The idea that it's a football is the perfect metaphor because you're carrying it throughout the story. You're constantly moving the concept of what the football is between each of your adventures. The linchpin, as it gets pulled, gets placed somewhere new, and the ball, the theoretical ball, continues. Mm-hmm. It may not be the same MacGuffin. It may go from a note that turns into some package, that then turns into a bribe, that then turns into delivering a person, or an idea, or carrying that on, or a lie that then has to be turned in. All of that is something that gets carried along, but that is not what the plot is. It's just a thing.
Yep.
So always keep those two components when you're working with your story.
But that was all last 101.
Correct.
And we are here to talk about something entirely different today.
We are.
Now, it is my greatest regret that this is not episode 187.
Oh,
because we are going to be talking about death.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
It is unfortunately 188, so we can't make the obvious pun. But being the last 101, being the going into the winter months for us here in the Northern Hemisphere, this is we wanted to talk about death, lethality, finality, and where it sits in your game, how to deal with it as a storyteller. It's definitely one of those things I see a lot of questions about, like on r/DM Academy, behind the screen, on Reddit and whatnot, where people don't know how to cope with, like, well, I don't want to kill my players, or I did kill a player. Am I bad for having done so? Sorry, character, not player. Right. Don't kill your players.
Don't kill your players.
Unless they're being really annoying or they eat the last Cheeto. But it's a big source of contention, especially for new storytellers. Like, how do you?
Well, you look at the CR ratings even in D&D. Like when you're a brand new DM and you're running D&D, you look at these CR ratings and you think you're doing the right thing, and then you get them in the room with your players and you're like, oh God, I'm murdering them.
Yeah. Something bad just happens, and that's like, especially D&D. I do want to, like, address D&D, like, specifically at the beginning of any discussion about death, because it's a gateway game for a lot of gamers. It's most people's first game, especially nowadays with its rising popularity and accessibility.
Well, completely, yeah.
And also, a lot of people watching Critical Role and other various media and stuff like that, it draws them in.
It is the tissue of choice.
Yeah, it's the soup du jour.
Yeah.
But especially D&D, it's largely about killing. We've talked about this on the show before, about how it's like, 90% of your class abilities are just new, interesting ways to deal damage or avoid damage or manipulate your enemies in combat,
so that you can do more against
damage.
Them.
Yeah. And it's either about gaining the advantage in combat or outright performing combat. And then you look at the challenge rating levels, like you were just saying earlier. Challenge rating, in its own essence, is all based off of the experience that you would gain from killing that monster. So once again, the assumption of all of your challenge ratings is based around death.
Yeah.
And that creates a mechanical incentive to choose violence in
definitely.
Those instances of, like, there's a supposition that you are going to get into combat, and that combat is going to be lethal for your enemies. And you will move on to the next combat encounter after that.
Yeah.
And how much roleplay you want to sprinkle in is entirely up to your group, Yeah.
Now, I'm going to put something, a caveat at the beginning of this that I deliberately left out of our discussion. But I want to put it here, is that we are not going to discuss, because I think it's a 202 level thing, what death and lethality means to your plot on the other side. We are going to focus on the players and the characters side of this.
Okay.
For this discussion, because there's a whole thing to be said about my players just wiped my big bad evil guy.
Oh,
what
yeah.
What do I do now?
Sure.
What does that mean? And should that be a thing? Should your players, are you a bad person for letting your players go on a murder spree and be murder hobos?
Yeah,
I think there's a 202 level discussion that talks about what that talks about within story, within your players, and other things. But let's focus back.
You are correct on both counts. That is a 202 discussion, and we are not going to
going there. So focusing back a little bit to what you're talking about in regards to mechanics, it's hard to then decide if there is a purpose within a story that isn't D&D. That's another narrative-based system to talk about what is the purpose then. Because if we remove it from D&D and say it's not the mechanics, we're not playing a board game that's about murder, right?
Yeah, sure.
So now we're stepping back into story. We have to reference that and say, okay, what are we trying to store when we're talking about lethality? Like, what are we expressing?
Why do we put death in the cards at all?
Correct.
A possible outcome.
Exactly. Yeah. Obviously, killing is a form of showing strength and power. It makes, on the other side of the coin, it is making the PCs feel like they are threatened. It's giving a sense that they can feel threatening.
Sure.
As well, and in either way, that raises the stakes.
Yes.
You know?
Because I mean, death is such a grand and final consequence.
But it's also easy.
It is.
It is super easy.
But I mean that's a bit of a discussion for later. But yeah, no, it's a bit cheap.
Yeah,
but it is extreme.
It's accessible.
Yeah,
because everybody understands it, whether or not they've experienced it. I'm not going to go there. Again, that's a 202 level discussion about whether or not your players have experienced death or seen death or worked with death. In multiple fields, everything from EMS to military and whatever you want to go into. But it has that natural thought because you're there and the concept of loss becomes the stress that goes in there. I'm going to lose ground. We see that all the time. Sometimes it is also just the space of the story. If I'm in Aliens in the universe, I don't even have to start a game. The moment you tell me, hey, we're going to be playing in the Aliens universe, I know that the story is dangerous.
Oh, cool. 3 of us won't make it out of your game.
Exactly. I know that. There is literally settings and themes that immediately tell you that.
Yeah, Call of Cthulhu has that reputation, too. Of just come with a stack of investigators, because they're either going to go mad or they're going to get killed.
Yeah. I mean, dread. The word dread tells you that you're already in a stressful situation that is probably going to lead to a high level of lethality.
Yeah.
The game Paranoid. You're already starting down a path.
Paranoia front loads you with 6 clones because there's just an expectation.
Yeah, and that's the thing.
Several times.
There are sometimes when the system kind of addresses it, but really it's the theme. There's a darn good chance that you're just not going to make it out of this, and you're probably going to have another character.
Sure.
Right? But then you run the big C. Consequences.
Yeah. And that's usually where you hear most discussion of death in your role-playing games, based around death should be on the table as a consequence if you making bad decisions. If you choose to walk into that room and tell the red dragon something about its mother, and it breathes fire on you, guess what? That's your own doing. That's your bad decision making there. There's a lot of times where puzzles and stuff like that will be, will have lethal consequences. Think Indiana Jones. The ceiling is coming down and it's got spikes coming out of it. And if you don't succeed on that search check or whatever to find the secret lever that makes the thing stop, well, then you get crushed to death. Sorry, that's just how that's what it says here in the module, you know?
Then you have the concept of just boundaries, game boundaries. 7C, I'm going to be going through a gateway to another place, and there's a space in between that if I open my eyes, there is no other rule. You're just gone.
I love that. In it says, if you open your eyes, take the person's character sheet, and if you're feeling especially cruel, tell them what they see.
Yeah. There's some that actually state that you should just blend the character sheet. It's gone. That character can exist. It is gone.
Yep.
And I put that on a scale of that as a hard boundary. This game is meant to be heroic. Your characters are supposed to be heroes and the good guys. And one of your characters just goes out and goes on a murder spree, wiping the whole town out. Okay, well, that character's gone. Sorry.
Yeah.
Figure yourself out and make a different character, because that is not what we're playing here.
Because you've gone off the deep end, and that character's no longer a hero. They are a villain. I may confiscate them and bring them back as a villain NPC later, but probably not.
It's making an example of that situation.
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
And that's consequences C and boundaries realistically in my mind.
Sure.
But there is an extreme point to this where it is no longer extreme. It is just the acceptable norm. Morkborg is example, like we talked about with some of the systems where literally it's what you want. It's a roguelike game. We're just going into the grinder.
Oversaturation of death is a thing that actually works for Morkborg's aesthetic, because it's like the end times. Life is cheap, death is easy. Like,
I was reading, but I didn't get a chance to go and look it up yet. Somebody said that there is a Starship Troopers style Morkborg game where the players are actually sitting at the command level, and a mission comes up, they grab a team, and then they play as the team through the meat grinder for successes and failures.
It's like Starship Troopers meets Darkest Dungeon.
Yeah.
Oh, that's wild.
But you have a team.
Yeah.
And you're trying to keep the good. So it's a little board gamey in an RTS sense, and that's it. But you're still there doing it live.
All right, get Wayne June on the line, and we'll talk about running that.
The other thing that kind of gave me was XCOM vibes. Mm-hmm. You know, where you're just randomly slotting in, and people can play other characters. It's literally just a very simple class. You're going to do this thing, and there is plot that's going on, but you're sitting at a high enough level that you know everything. There's no secrets between the individual characters.
That's interesting. We'll have to look into that a little bit
later.
later.
I thought that was kind of a cool idea. But again, it's a meat grinder game with some high-level storytelling that can still be done.
But, like, you know that going in.
There's no investment in those characters.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I think, like, it's possible to, like, take it when it's not part of the setting.
Yeah.
And if you, like, Game of Thrones, for instance.
Mm-hmm. Your fan is going to town.
On my laptop?
Yeah.
It is. Wow. Sorry if you guys can hear that.
I can hear it. I can hear it through my headset. I apologize.
Oh my goodness, I don't know what it's
We'll
doing
figure this out before
right
next
now.
show.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
But
downloading updates, I'm sure.
Yeah, I don't know. But like Game of Thrones really numbed me to it. You know, where like during the first season, it was very shocking because it was like, oh wow, like they killed Ned Stark like right out of the bat, and you're like, oh man, I was really attached to that character. Holy cow, nobody's safe. Anybody can die at any moment. And then like by season 3, you're just like, I mean, look, I like this character, but I'm not getting attached. They're gonna be dead three episodes from now, and lo and behold. Yeah. Someone sticks a sword in them 3 episodes later, and you just feel nothing, you know? Yeah. And it's possible to hit that level of saturation in your role-playing games as well. If you're just throwing death out that cheaply, you know, you severely harm the narrative impact that it has, and the dramatic impact that it has. So it's something you kind of want to, like, you know, apply it a little conservatively.
If there is anything to say, exceptional death destroys the narrative.
Yeah.
That's the truth, because death is the end of a story. Exceptional death is the end of the story. Because nobody has an investment. They're just losing it. So, let's just keep rolling with it. It'll figure itself out, I think. I don't think you actually have a problem. I think it's doing something in the background.
Huh.
So,
right.
In any case, so does it have to be this way?
No.
Is the real question.
No, there's plenty of options for storytellers for consequences that are not lethal.
Exactly. That feel just as much.
And I think, you know, taking a moment, each individual storyteller, each individual story that we are telling, it's very valuable to just ask yourself, how lethal is my story? You know?
Or how lethal will it be?
And not only when creating your story, you know, I mean, I think when, you know, obviously when creating your story, when you're like sitting down and going like, okay, what sort of story am I going to tell? Is this going to be like Game of Thrones level, you know, death is around every corner? Or is this a survival story where death, you know, could be behind every cliff face or in every cave, dangling from every tree or something like that? Or is this more of a lighthearted romp? You know, is this more of a high heroic story where like death is a very deep and dramatic and very rare thing for
people get kicked out of windows all the time, but they'll be back in the next scene.
Sure, exactly. And, also I think it's very valuable to ask your players what they want, too. This isn't a one-person decision.
Right.
For instance, I had this conversation when we moved over into Savage Worlds. We decided collectively that we were going to play with a special rule called Heroes Never Die. It removes the bleed-out mechanic when you take 4 wounds. Ordinarily, it's kind of like your death saves in Savage Worlds, and it essentially removes all of that, which basically makes it impossible to die unless you look the storyteller in the eye and go, I think I would die from this.
Are you sure?
Are you sure?
Yeah,
I think I'm pretty sure. I think that was a lethal blow. Okay.
How do you want to do it?
Do you have any last words? Et cetera, et cetera. And you roll through that. But other than that, you're just incapacitated. You'll get better. You'll be back next scene.
Yeah.
Not that it won't come with any sort of complications or anything like that, but death is not going to be the result of your wounds. We played through the first little plot part, and we wanted to use that as a safety net.
Yeah.
Because we weren't used to the combat rules and whatnot, and we didn't want, to... Going into a new system, you didn't want to be ignorant to the rules, and that be the cause of your character's death. That felt cheap. So we used it as a safety net at first, but then once we were all kind of used to Savage Worlds rules and how our characters performed in combat, I revisited the question and said, do we want to continue with this? And overwhelmingly, you guys all said yes, because you were more interested in continuing the story and telling the narrative about your characters and with your characters than worrying about death. It wasn't a game about surviving in lethal circumstances. It was a game about a group of comrades in the Elder Scrolls settings and what shenanigans they get up to.
Exactly.
Death wasn't an important factor to you guys.
No.
And so you wanted to keep the safety net. And I actually voted to remove it, but you all wanted it there, and I said, okay. I mean, I don't want to remove it so badly that I want to force this upon you.
Yep.
So yeah, we're playing with Heroes Never Die.
Yep.
Will
it carry to the end? We don't know.
I don't know. I think we discussed maybe keeping it through Act 2 and removing it for Act 3 because that's going to be like the last act of my game.
You might as well at that point, yeah.
You might as well because it might. Who knows? The stakes might be higher that way.
That's right.
But it's good to have these conversations with your players of like, how much do you want death to be a thing? And every game is different,
Without a doubt. I mean, you do have levels between You Don't Die and Meat Grinder.
Yes.
There are various levels in there, and they can shift a lot.
Yes.
You're not tied to anything. I mean, Morkborg, you're kind of tied to it. The system literally tells you you're gonna die twice.
This is literally the end of the world.
Yeah.
You will not be remembered. Make a new character so you can be back in the action before the corpse if your old one is cold.
Exactly. And Paranora, during character creation, is reminding you that you're making mistakes and will die.
Yes.
So it's there, but like
Paranoia gives you, like I said earlier, gives you 6 clones of your character that will be replaced immediately upon death with all of their old memories uploaded to them.
Right.
So you can continue playing immediately from the point at which you last died.
Right.
Because it's just assumed you're going to get killed multiple times.
Yep. And then you have fluffy games like Pokemon.
Yeah.
Those trainers aren't dying.
Yeah.
Those Pokemon aren't dying.
It's not that kind of game.
No.
It's a game about hope. It's a game about friendship, overcoming hardship through dedication, teamwork, in a big, bright, happy world. Like, when have you ever seen a gloomy Pokemon, picture? Like, maybe a picture of Lavender Town from the first game or something like that. But even then, it's like bright lavender purple with a big grinning Gengar,
Sometimes you do have death that's important. Like the guy who was in the Ghost Temple. Where he went to go find his...
Yeah, that's Lavender Town, yeah.
Yeah.
He's in Pokemon Tower.
But it was part of the story.
I guess it's been officially confirmed that's not true, but it is my headcanon, and screw you, it's true.
Sure, there you go.
Gary loses his Rattata, or his Raticate, and has to take him to Pokemon Tower to bury him.
Yeah.
I will die on that hill.
I think it's a great idea.
I will absolutely die on that hill. But even then, though, it's not explicitly stated.
No.
And even Pokemon Tower is even though it is filled with ghost type Pokemon and tombstones for them. It's like, it's not really mourned. Like, we don't really focus on the death part. It's like, oh, there's ghost Pokemon here. Did you want a Gengar?
See,
did you want a Haunter?
I would love for them to do like the Valhalla of Pokemon, where you have like these warrior trainers who have warrior Pokemon who just have a totally different mind frame of like, we go to battle together.
Yeah.
And it would put a different spin on it.
Yeah, it could.
The glories of battle.
But I submit to you, though, that might not be Pokemon anymore. It might just not finish. It might not fit the field. The worst thing that's typically going to happen in your game of Pokemon is your Oddish gets a little roughed up by Team Rocket and they steal your lunch money.
Yeah, that's true. They slap him back at the ball because he's got to stay there to get
exactly,
or has to go to the nurse.
You take him to Nurse Joy. She makes them all better, and you try again.
Yep.
Death and Lethality, not on the board at that point.
No.
And then like you run 7C,
which is your Three Musketeers, golden age of heroism, swashbuckling. People are going to get stabbed, shot, literally aimed at with cannons, right? And the NPCs are gonna get murdered by the dozen, injured in severe ways, dramatic ways.
Sure.
The whole concept of a dramatic wound, But your character doesn't die to a bunch of brutes with clubs,
right?
The villain doesn't die to rebelling villagers, right?
Mm-hmm. Heroes can kill villains. Only villains can kill heroes.
And that is the way the game is played. But it is explicitly stated. That is the Session 0 understanding that you will not die to a henchman or a brute.
It's a bit like a gamified version of that quote from Mal Reynolds in Firefly, where he's like, if I come for you, you're gonna be facing me and you're gonna be armed.
Yeah.
It's never going to be a knife in the dark that does your character in cheaply. It's never going to be a pit trap rolling a little too much damage and, you just fell to your death.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And that's how I've kept that concept through all of my games that I enjoy. Because I want my players to feel like the only way that they're going to get taken down is through the motivation of their player doing something exceptional.
Yeah. Yeah.
Either one way or the other, right? And it's those types of things where then you can push the boundaries. I remember a 7th game where I was playing, and one of the players was an Eisen. He was an old Eisen, like sub prince kind of a thing, like barely had any lineage, but he felt the proudness of his family. And this henchman and his men show up, and he's like, all right, you'll be taking him to the villain, basically. And because they had captured us all in a fight, and he's just, the rest of us are all gone, but he has still sitting around with dramatic wounds. Like, he's got wounds that he's just been soaking because he's got so much soak that he can pull down.
Sure.
And one of the things you can do is you can spend your drama to soak. I mean, you still take the wounds, but you're soaking. The next time you take it, you have the other wounds and the new ones to keep going.
Yep.
And so the one guy hits him, like the brute hits him, and he goes, I'm soaking it. And he rolls and soaks it. And he's just like, and he spits out some blood. He's like, is that the best you can do? And then, of course, the next big guy hits him to try and knock him out, and he fails it, but he spends a drop. I'm soaking it. So now he's up to like 120 wounds. He's not going to get the next one. And so the henchman comes in at that point, and basically, we all thought it was fantastic that he was basically staring down because he wanted that henchman to come back in. He wanted the scene to be that guy doing it.
Yeah.
And really hurting him so that the villain would say something about it because he wanted him brought in. And like, he's just like, you're going to have to take out at least 2 teeth kind of a thing. And the guy just literally grabs the end of a musket and bashes him to knock him out. And he's just like, I'm not even going to roll. I take it.
Yep.
I go down.
And it's like 3 or 4 dramatic wounds.
Oh, it would have just put him right out.
Yeah.
Like, but it wasn't going to kill him. But it definitely would ruin his day. And we all just clapped at the scene because he was playing his character.
Yeah.
He was staring down death and not giving 2 shits.
Yeah.
Basically is what it came down to.
Yeah.
But you can't have those scenes when the mechanics specifically tell you how death has to happen. But if you can set the rules to say, this is how death happens, but only under this condition.
Yeah.
Then you open up that door to let your players just push that envelope.
Sure.
Completely.
Sure, absolutely.
So
So I guess we should talk a little bit about the elephant in the room in any discussion about death, especially for 101 discussions about death, and that is, okay, how do you handle the death of a character?
Suck it up, roll around in the dirt.
I mean, first off, I mean, let's all acknowledge. I mean, it can be a hard moment for the player.
Yeah.
We all get attached to our characters, and it can be a little rough for a player to lose their character.
Well, I also think a lot of it has to do with circumstances of how quickly they can accept it.
Yeah.
It's funny, getting to the acceptance point can be quite challenging. Often there are stages before it. Denial.
Grief, bargaining.
Yeah. And you see all those
Anger,
things,
depression.
whether or not those, I'm sure the psychologists, who are listed as are going, those aren't real. Like we've proven those stages don't actually exist. But those moments do still happen. Like, no, that can't be happening to my character. The dice couldn't have done that. No, I couldn't have. I guess that's the case. But like, do I have this to be able to mitigate it? No, we don't. We can't do that. Well, what about this spell? No, I've already used up all my spells. Crap. You're rushing to the moment of recognition that it's happened, and then once it's there, it's okay. It's happened. Now, what does this mean to the narrative for that player?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you respond at the table as the character, as the players around, as the DM?
Yeah, sure.
And
I mean, I think this is where you really have to look at every story, every setting, every table is going to be a little bit different about this one.
Yeah.
And you're going to need to consider what place death has in your story.
Yep.
I mean, if the theme is gritty realism, if things are dangerous and lethal, this might be expected. It's tough, but, suck it up. We move on. This is a game of Alien. This is a game of Morkborg. Like, okay, buddy, you kind of knew what was going to happen when you walked in here. It says don't bother giving your character a name in Morkborg.
Yeah.
What did you think was going to happen?
I mean, I want to say years ago now, I told the story of the guy who brought someone into the game just to kill their character and have them leave the game to show that the game was lethal. Like, he wanted it to be in plot.
Interesting.
Yeah, the other players did not know. He was an add-on, but he explicitly told him ahead of time. He's like, I am going to kill your character. It's going to happen in-game. That's the whole purpose you're here. And he was down for it because he realized that he wanted the game to have weight, and the other person agreed. He's like, based on your story and where you're going with this, you really want this death to feel like it. He's like, yeah, my players are murder hobos who run around like Steel Battalion against paper enemies.
Yeah.
And I want these people to feel that the villain is real, that the villain will murder you, and it is not going to be kind. And it worked.
Yeah.
It changed the scope of their game. Now, I'm not saying everyone should do something like that, but I definitely think it was a bold move.
Sure.
To have that and just have that player be like, yeah, that was too much for me. You guys have a good night. Thank you. I'll see you guys in the next game when you guys have another session 0. I always appreciate your storytelling. And he just walked. And all the players were just like, oh my, like, he was here, and it was session 5, and you murdered his character. I said, yeah, he did something dumb and bold.
Uh-huh.
And the villain took care of it.
And there are consequences for that in this world.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a consequence that's possible? Suddenly I'm recalculating everything.
Yeah.
Bingo.
Yep, there you go. Yep. There you go.
And from the other side, though, you consider if your theme is more narrative, if you are playing something like 7th Sea or like my Tamriel game where we're not really worried about the death and the death being a consequence, consider options. I mean, if resurrection, does resurrection exist in your story? It doesn't in mine, but it does in mainline D&D.
Yeah.
Could something other than death have happened? Just because a character drops to 0 hit points or wounds or whatever game you're playing, whatever measurement of you have hit the dirt there is, can you do something else with that? Can you fade to black and have them like wake up in a jail cell?
Yeah.
Can you have them wake up, as the rain patters down on their face and they're it's hours later and somehow there's just like a dog licking their face, and they're like,
and they're in the ashes of the building under debris.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just unconscious. There's also the I saw you die. No, you saw me fall.
Right. Airbags. Can you believe it?
Yeah. And like we've had a lot of fun with that one. That's actually one of the core mechanics in
or abilities
adventure.
Yeah.
Well, it's a mechanic anybody can do.
Right.
The ability just allows you to spend a lot more points bullshitting your way through a death.
That makes sense. Okay.
And from Adventure Tales, the Aeon Society, at least the White Wolf version of it. I don't know what Onyx Path, I think it is.
Yeah.
I don't know
what
they're doing with it. Yet they haven't produced the book yet. But I'm in the Kickstarter for that, so I'll find out.
I can't wait.
But your players can have a lot of fun of like, okay, explain to me how you escaped.
Yeah.
And I mean, most players are going to just crack their knuckles and go, okay, so no shit, there I was.
Yeah. So the guy shot me, right? Yeah.
Right.
And I ended up going through the wall, right? Okay. So what happened? And then, I fell down because that paper wall puts you into the courtyard.
Right. But there was an awning that broke my fall, and then I landed in a bush.
Right. So now I'm in that bush. But what you saw out there was one of the actual Yakuza guys who was down there underneath. You just couldn't tell in the rain that it wasn't me.
Yeah.
And that's where he put the extra 3 bullets into the Yakuza guy who was down there. I was just in the bush unconscious.
Yep.
And that's legitimate.
There you go, And you can have fun with this. You can have fun with this. And I think it's Dungeon World also suggests have some consequences for things like, okay, so cool, you do survive, but maybe in that fall one of your prized possessions broke.
Yeah, like an athletics check where you're climbing, instead of outright failing and just falling to your death because you're in a chain with people.
Your bag falls and you go to grab it. You don't fall, but you have to let go of the bag, otherwise you will. So you let go.
Right. Or things start tumbling out of it.
So pick 3 things out of your inventory and remove them.
Right.
And those are the things that you lost,
Yeah.
There's a lot of different ways to levy consequences on them and still continue the story and have fun with it. Death doesn't always have to be your option,
Yeah, one of the ones that got me was the climb where one of the characters just had a terrible athletics score but was trying to compensate with strength. Like anytime an athletics fail would say, he'd be like, hey, I want to make a strength check. And the DM finally kind of, because that was something that somebody had suggested.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you failed your athletics, but you could still you could grapple the wall basically.
Yeah.
And then recover. And so after the second one of those, he was just like, the guy made his strength check, but didn't make his next athletics check to be able to continue moving. He's like, well, I'll just make it next round. He's like, actually, you can hear something. It sounds like metal. You look down to see your pouch caught on a stone as you were trying to hike yourself up, and it's tore, and your money is just pouring out.
Oh, no. Yeah.
Do you want to reach for it? And he's like, what does that mean? You release your grapple. Check.
Yeah.
So with the wall, and he's just like, he's like, your guys can throw you a rope, but that's your athletics check at an advantage.
Yep.
Then you can climb the rope, but your money is just pouring out.
Yep.
Pouring down the cliffside.
Yep. That's a great consequence.
Yeah.
And one of the I would say one of the other things is leaving the door open.
Yeah.
I mean, you can absolutely kill a character, but I think so recently in Critical Role, one of the main characters died. And I'm not going to get into it for spoiler reasons because it is current season. But there was a Matt Mercer was talking about it on Four-Sided Dive, which is their little after show thing, and he was talking about how he likes to leave the door open essentially. So if a character does die, you have a conversation with that character or with a player, and be like, hey, how are you feeling about your character dying? Are you feeling like the character is done and you accept their death and you want to make a new one? Or do you feel like you still have more story to tell with them?
Right.
And because if you're still wanting that character to come back, I, as the storyteller, can make contrivances to allow for opportunities to resurrect them
right
to come up,
Right.
And it's not 100%, the players still need to go, do the things to get that opportunity to happen. That might involve some exploration. It might involve some diplomacy or some sacrifice of something on their part to get you back. And then, he does like these resurrection rituals where there's roles involved, where there's a chance of failure, and the spirit might not even return, So again, it's not 100%, but at least he's willing as a storyteller to open that door and be like, I can make a cleric who can res you show up in some capacity.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that you'll at least have the chance to bring your character
The Miracle Max moment.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. There can always be that, especially if the story feels like it needs to have those things.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think you should always keep that in mind.
Absolutely. And it just having that possibility, that's something to strive for, that's something to hope for.
Yeah.
Can really soften the blow of losing a good character that you're really attached to.
Yeah. And you should be having fun. Games are meant to be fun.
Yes.
Even when a character dies. This isn't a situation where you're trying to prove a point or teach a lesson. Yeah,
you don't be like, I'm going to kill their character because this guy's a jerk.
Yeah,
like,
I've read that enough where it's
yeah.
No, then you're not having fun. You're being vindictive.
Yeah.
Have a conversation. Don't be vindictive. No one learns from someone being vindictive.
Yeah.
That's never worked once. There's no story where like, oh man, he killed my whole family. Whew. That guy, he taught me a hell of a lesson. I
will do better next time.
I'm just going to do better. No, that doesn't happen. That calls for revenge every time.
You're just creating animosity at your table if you do that.
Yeah, if it's a villain trying to prove a point, that's a perfect reason for them to do murder.
Sure.
But oftentimes that doesn't work out for the villain. And that's where those moments and contrivances can come from.
Yeah. So let's scale this up a little bit.
Okay.
Not just losing one character.
Oh, the TPK, the total party kill.
The total party kill. The quintessential elephant in the room about any lethality discussion here.
Yeah.
New and old storytellers fear this.
Yeah, OSRs, I feel there's a mixed bag on that because some OSRs do run roguelike, where it's like the adventure either happens and someone survives, or you prepare and you have multiple character sheets.
Oh yeah, sure. Look, I mean, again, this is going to be, the impact of a TPK is always game dependent. If you TPK an OSR game, I think that's kind of, I don't say expected, but like it's on the menu.
Yeah.
It's that style of game.
And I think the TPK as a statement is often put with, it is not expected.
Right.
This isn't something that the players knew about, so it's going to be frustrating.
Right. There was a whoopsie somewhere, either in the characters, in the players,
in the dice, whatever.
In the dice, in the storyteller setting up the encounter. And you start kind of going through like the checklist of like, where did the breakdown happen? Did I add too many or too powerful monsters? Are the PCs equipped to deal with this threat? If they aren't, are they going to dig in and decide to fight to the death, or are they going to actually flee?
Well, it's a trap room, and they don't get the gimmick that's obviously the button on the wall to click to stop everything.
Yeah.
It's the Indiana Jones where there's a hole here. There's got to be a lever in the inside, and the other player just doesn't pull the lever because they want to role play that they don't like snakes.
I almost wiped you guys as a party
in the fire room
because you didn't realize the gimmick was you just had to sit still and wait.
Yeah.
You kept trying different combinations of going into the fire and flipping switches, which makes the fire more intense, and all you had to do was just stand there.
Yep.
And it was just that simple.
Yep.
Literally do nothing.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, we almost lost a couple characters there, And then you've got the phenomenon where like groups will decide, and possibly from a metagame standpoint, that they're intended to win every fight. So therefore, if combat breaks out, they will win. Therefore, they just need to double down on standing and fighting.
Right, instead of running away.
Instead of running away and turning it into a chase scene or something like that.
Right.
And so you'll have, 3 people out of a 4-person, party dead, and that 4th person is standing there going, I don't understand. Why are we dying? What was I supposed to do? And you're like, dude, it is an Elder Red Dragon. This fight never should have happened.
Right. Or you have the situation where you have so many brutes, so many numbers that you're literally moving through, and there's no place to rest.
Yeah.
There's no place to take that moment and breather. And now your players are ill prepared because in their mind they're like, well, we could just take a short rest. You don't have the spells to do that to be able to protect yourself.
Yep.
That this isn't happening.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you've got to keep moving.
And then you start asking yourself, like, is this fun or is this frustrating? Are the dice going to screw him over? Even if I do balance this encounter correctly, is this going to be something that, like, they're just, like, going to roll very poorly?
Yeah.
Like, for a while, like, when we were playing 5th edition, I was thinking we were still going to be playing 5th edition when we got to the current section where we're going to Apocrypha, right? And I had Mind Flayers lined up to be something you would encounter over there because they fit.
Yeah.
I'm even using Mind Flayer minis to represent
definitely.
Seekers. So they were, and I was just going to use them as straight up. I mean, they're not going to be Mind Flayers like from, the canon and stuff. They're going to be Daedra, but, I wasn't going to change their abilities any.
No, it fits within the framework.
Yeah, exactly.
But at the same time, Mind Flayers are dangerous as hell.
They are, and you're looking at these things and you're going like, okay, I mean, they don't have that great of an AC. They don't have that many hit points, ultimately. They've got a few scary spell-like abilities and stuff like that. But, like, they have the ability to one-shot people if you can grab onto them and take a big chunk out of their head.
Mm-hmm.
That's a death. That is a straight-up death right there, And whenever you're putting something like that in your game, you're like, on one hand, okay, it's fits the narrative. It is threatening. It will make you guys feel the danger of the encounter of like, oh boy, what are we messing with here? But at the same time, in the back of your head, you're playing through the scenarios and going like, what if I roll a 20 and they roll a 1?
Well, and that's the thing is that often systems that have lethality in them in a balanced sense, and I'll use the word balance very lightly, often have only 2 stages. Heroic players who are rarely at risk that then run equal risks against something and they just perish. Yeah. Because that's it. It's a one-shot perish or you're successful. That's it. Mm-hmm. It's a duelist design.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the difference is in duels, it's rarely to the death. And that is the key. Is if you can understand that about D&D, that duels are rarely to the death, you can scale your encounters appropriately, but most people can't think of it that way.
Yeah. And then you gotta ask yourself, what happens if you do TPK the party?
I mean, sometimes it's not so bad. I've heard some really great stories where, like, the DM TPKs and is, like, crushed and then watches everybody go, oh my god, that was amazing.
Let me ask you this, because I have an answer to this question, but I want to ask you first.
Sure.
Have you ever TPK'd a party?
Once.
Once?
Once.
What was it like?
Hilarious.
Okay.
Because they stepped into a situation, and it was the second round where they realized they made a critical mistake.
Oh, no.
Stepping into that situation. Like, I presented it as a deathly situation.
Okay.
To make them basically avert and go a different direction. And it's the Han Solo situation where he's running down the corridor after 2 stormtroopers, which are clearly running away from him. You don't have to chase them. Mm-hmm. They're going away. You know they're going to go talk to somebody, right? And basically, they turned a corner, and there were 60 stormtroopers in the next room with heavy weapons in some cases, and maybe even heavy armor, and they are all like, we got this. And they took cover and started doing things. Now, it wasn't Star Wars, it was a D&D situation.
Sure.
Fantasy. And they, like, what do you do as a storyteller when there are literally 20 enemies in the room against 4? It's not like they can disappear.
Yeah, I mean, you just...
So I literally in 2 turns wiped 2 of the 4 just out of movement and simple attacks.
Yeah.
And
it's a lot of incoming
and they
attacks.
were like, dude, someone's got to get over to me. And they're like, when?
And do what?
When?
Right.
And within 2 more turns, the last player was basically deciding to go down in a blaze of glory instead of bailing.
Yeah.
He wanted to die in the room. And, taking on. So they surrounded him, and he just kept fighting, and so they put him down.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was ridiculous. The whole thing was ridiculous. At the end, they were just like, watching that happen, they were laughing. Because they realized that the dice weren't against them. There was nothing wrong.
They made a tactical error, and they paid for it.
They made a ridiculous tactical error, and then they were just like, well, that explains a lot of the bones in some of those places. And it was like...
Well,
you literally walked into a place where there are guys who have killed so many people that they haven't even had a chance to clean up their kills.
Yeah. Well, at least they were all in good spirits about it.
They were. Good. And I was able to shift the story at that point that they were captured and basically meant to be cooked.
Gotcha.
And stripped of their gear and everything like that.
And then the story continues from
right.
Because now you turn it into an escape from captivity thing, yeah.
Kind of, actually. They made a deal with the big bad guy to work for him for a while. Which worked fine. The story didn't go from there, but the TPK was hilarious.
Yeah.
But the whole point was that I watched them do it to themselves, and they actually kind of enjoyed it out to the end.
Yeah, sure.
Great.
I had one TPK. And it was the last session of my game. Mm-hmm. And it was like going to be the last session.
Yeah, I remember this, yeah.
The setup was there was a Lich's phylactery that was created by the gods. And so therefore no mortal hand could destroy it. And so they'd done some investigation. There was another NPC that was helping them out with it. Basically said, like, yeah, you don't have to actually destroy the thing if you can put it somewhere where not even the bad guys can get it. Mm-hmm. And there was this giant, like, imagine the Sarlacc pit mixed with a black hole.
Sure.
In the abyss, in hell, basically. And they're like, yeah, there's this demon that is like that. He's like the world devourer or something like that. And if you can chuck this thing into its mouth, not even demons will be able to go in and get it out.
Right.
And so there was this long journey to go down into and find his lair and go in there. And I'd put a Marilith demon in sort of this like chapel out front of where his chamber was. And she was protecting the master's chamber. And she was like... the party group was like level 14 or something like that, and she was like challenge rating 17 or something. So, just absolutely wiping the walls with them. And they got, actually, my ex's character into the chamber and kind of gambled that the Marilith wouldn't follow her in. She would stay out and fight, that she wouldn't go, into his chambers. And that gamble paid off, because she basically stayed outside and killed the rest of the party while my ex chucked this thing into the mouth of the demon and went in with it, basically, to make sure that it got, deep enough in where it needed to be. And so there was this moment where they all had these like kind of tattoos on their arms that gave them all like lifelink with each other. Mm-hmm. They could sense the direction and the general well-being of all of their allies.
Okay.
And so she was in the master's chamber trying to figure out how to get this thing into its mouth and survive, and felt the last one of her allies wink out.
So she just went for it.
And there was this great heroic moment where like they all linked hands and was like, none of us are making it out of here. You realize that, right? Mm-hmm. Well, it was good serving with you.
Yep.
Like, it's been a pleasure.
Yep.
And one of them stepped forward and took a hit for the next guy.
Right.
And just was blended.
Right.
Instantly, yeah. Since she's in this chamber and she's feeling each one of them wink out and having this moment of this heroic moment of like, okay, they paid with their lives to buy me the time to get in here. I have no way to get out of the abyss.
Yeah.
I might as well just go in with it to make sure it gets to its destination, and leaps into the mouth of this demon.
With the thing
and I mean, when I say we had like cheers and high fives at the table for that TPK, was just honestly one of the greatest.
No, it's a beautiful moment, honestly. That's movie quality magic right there.
It really was. It really was.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah, I feel like at the end of that story, you're like, it's been 50 years, and looking through the city, there are no statues. There are no plaques. No one knew.
Yeah.
Because life is okay.
Uh-huh.
And you're like,
But but you know what else there ain't?
What?
A lich.
Exactly. Because life is okay.
Yeah.
Life goes on. And you're like, okay, that made it worth it right there. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really good. It was really good.
But in those kind of situations, you're just vibe checking the group.
Yeah.
You're looking to see where things are at, and sometimes in the moment you still have to take a breath. You have to let them soak it in to see where things are at, because it's amazing what a group will do with each other.
Oh, absolutely.
During those moments where somebody may feel completely cheated out of it, everyone else will be like, "Dude, it's okay.
It's cool. It's cool. This is a role-playing game. This stuff happens.
Let's just roll with this." But so don't immediately feel you have to retcon.
Yeah.
That you have to roll this back in any ways. You can let what happened happen. Remember, once the eyes are closed on those characters, no one knows what happened.
Right. You're the storyteller. You are in control of the situation. Like, very much like your story there. Like, you didn't say, you didn't write it in pen that those characters were dead.
No.
That they had stopped breathing and ceased to be.
No, they were all stabbed in various ways, but...
Sure, I'm sure they were harmed all to hell.
Yeah.
But you looked at that TPK and went, all right. The vibe in the room is we made a tactical misstep.
Right.
We weren't prepared narratively to have a TPK.
Right.
And we didn't actually see anybody die. Let's all just say you were captured and we'll go from there.
Right.
And you have that power as a storyteller.
Yeah.
And
I literally made the villain... I made a statement by the villain that was basically like, no heroes would ever, die this way. Who the hell are you? Kind of a thing. And he's like... And they all immediately took it as, oh my god, he thinks we're somebody else. He doesn't realize it's us. And I rolled with that.
He called us heroes. He doesn't realize we're a bunch of chuckles.
Well, it was the opposite. Was that, like, they had challenged him way long before, and they were like, we're just going to go do this thing. And his whole thought was like, well, these actual heroes would never have done that. And they took it that way. And I was like, oh, so he doesn't even know it's us. Okay, let's see if we can con him. And I was like, okay, let's roll with that. But it takes away their agency.
Yeah.
The moment that you set a hard thing, or you retcon and be like, okay, that didn't happen exactly that way, don't. Just continue the story.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You're in control. You are the storyteller. You have the final authority on this, but it doesn't end like we were talking about. It doesn't mean that death is death.
Yeah, sure. Like we said earlier, ask your character to describe how they cheated death. There's like Dungeon World has that move where like you
bargaining
when you take your last breath, bargain with death.
Yes.
Maybe an ally comes to their aid. This is one I particularly like because I'm big on rewarding players and characters for their actions in game. If you guys go out of your way to befriend an NPC,
sure.
I want that NPC to feel like a tangible ally to you.
Yeah. That makes sense.
I want a good thing to come from you having put in the work to befriend that NPC. So, maybe this is a moment where you look and you're like, God, they have really been spending a lot of time hanging out with the captain of the guard of the major kingdom they're in.
Maybe he rides in.
Maybe they ride in. Yeah. Maybe this is a moment where they're like, yeah, we heard that there was some ruckus over here, and we found you guys all lying broken and beaten on the ground.
Yeah. I love the chopper coming in thing.
Yeah. Medevac
shows up, and you're like, who the heck is this guy? Oh, it's not him. Your eyes closed. Son of a... and now you owe somebody something, But that's the thing. But if you don't have death in the game, what are those consequences then? Right. How do you step on? How do you take that next breath?
And this is a big discussion. I actually just saw this discussion on Reddit of well, if you don't have death, what consequences are there?
There are tons.
So many.
We could die, or worse, be expelled.
Right. Well, and this is the thing. I think that probably one of the biggest reactions I get when I tell people that I play with the Heroes Never Die special rule in my game, is how do you have any sense of drama? What can you hold over your characters if you can't kill them?
Yeah.
Yeah. How are you supposed to threaten them? How do your characters not just go what are you gonna do? Come at me. I'm invincible. First off, characters don't know that we're playing with the Heroes Never Die special rule, so we all play as if lethality were possible.
Yeah.
And there's an understanding at my table because of that.
Yeah.
I would say I've actually had to talk you guys out of being careful of death more often than I've had to talk you down from being brazen about it. And honestly, like, there's so many other ways of doing this, and like, using death as your only thing is just unimaginative.
There are so many more personal and connective things that you can do to somebody, and I think that's really where the weight comes in, is understanding
that not every consequence has to be mechanical.
Correct.
Yeah.
That narrative consequences can sometimes be way more damning.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So what are you gonna do? Kill me? No, I'm gonna send a letter to your mother, and 4 pictures, all of them showing you being evil. You're gonna tell my mom I'm evil. Oh yes, I'm gonna show her in multiple ways.
Because I know your mother holds a vast fortune, and I know you stand to inherit it.
Yeah, and she'll also never ever invite you for dinner again after that. And you know that boat in the harbor? It's gonna be leaving tomorrow.
Yeah.
You will be here, destitute, dry, and without a penny to your name. Good luck.
But very much alive.
Yeah, but very, very much alive to remember all of these words.
Exactly.
That's terrifying to some characters.
I mean, the thing is, most players are going to get invested in your story in some way, regardless of whether that's a space story, fantasy story, super lethal story, or just you're playing Pokemon or whatever. They're going to be invested in that, and they're going to fear losing like that NPC ally or an opportunity to advance their character or a personal goal
or a little kid's reputation with the kids at the orphanage.
Yeah,
just to have one of those little kids go, "Are you the baddie?"
Yeah.
Oh my god. If they've been taking care of those kids and seeing themselves as heroes in their eyes, and then one day that kid just trembles at the door staring at them with blood on their hands and goes,
the kids
"Oh no."
shrink back from the touch of his shadow, and they're like, "Oh no." Oh no, I'm the bad guy.
Yeah. But again, all of that comes down to proportional lethality.
Yeah.
To the reputation, to the tone of the story, to the moment, if you will.
And to the individual character, honestly. Like, different characters are going to value different things,
100%.
Like, my 7C character didn't give a crap about her reputation, honestly.
No.
But she's got kind of her own personal goals. She's got individual people she cares about disappointing.
Yes.
In the grand scheme of things, she could give a crap less what the world thinks about her. But there's like 3 people that, if they didn't like her, would devastate her. And that's your consequence to pull on right there. And you pulled on it several times, mostly because I had a background.
No, but that's the thing, is that game gave me what your conscience was.
Sure,
I love that about that. It helps that much more.
And then I was the character that got like thrown in the brig for murdering a pirate. By sniping him from
when the
300
captain
meters out
of the good guy ship looks at you and says, "That's still illegal."
Right. We're getting boarded by pirates. What did you expect me to do? Not that.
Yeah.
I didn't expect that. And that was
it's the
wrong.
Whoa.
It was bad, and you should feel bad.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I don't get it, but okay.
Yeah, but it's part of the world that is there, but not always obvious to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. But the big thing important to remember is that look, anytime you levy consequences on somebody of the non-lethal sort, okay, your consequences should be proportional.
I agree.
Okay. Don't behead someone when a slap on the wrist is called for, okay? Snubbing someone at the party does not warrant a hit squat being put out on them.
No, but also it's related to them. That's the second part that I would say, is that it's definitely related. That snubbing at a party should feel like a social consequence.
Sure, and
it's not like the guards should show up.
Right. You snub them at the party, they're going to trash your reputation, which is a social faux pas for a social consequence.
Correct.
If they find, if they fail to find an arrow trap, that is a physical failure. There's a very obvious and very immediate physical consequence.
You break in, you get thrown out.
Yeah.
Like, You break in and go to steal something like a cat burglar, you go to jail.
Right.
Even a villain will do that to you. Like, I don't have time for you. Here is the police. Have a nice day.
Right.
What, did you bribe them? No, you literally did grand theft at my home.
He's got the police on his side. Yes, because he was right.
Because he was still right. Yeah.
But your consequences should also be meaningful. Okay. And that's the big thing is finding.
I think that's the hard thing.
Finding the part in that like triangle of proportional, related, and meaningful. So like harming the reputation of a character that doesn't care about reputation isn't a consequence.
No.
Like, haha, you'll never work in this town again. Cool, I was leaving anyway. Like,
yeah,
I'm not going to be back here. Great consequence,
Yeah.
Hit them where it's actually going to hurt them.
Yeah.
If they're a social character, trashing their reputation is one thing. You're going to cut off social avenues for them.
Without a doubt.
If they're a barbarian who doesn't even understand social reputation or something like that, maybe hitting their standing with their own tribe. Or, hit them physically. Do something like get them beaten up, and if they're the one who's like, "Rawr, I'm the big scary barbarian, I can defeat anybody," take them down a peg by having them lose a fight.
Well, the one that got me in that was they don't. If it's clear that they can't lose the fight, it doesn't mean that they can't lose other things. Like, you lost your voice.
Mm-hmm.
They hit you in the throat. What does that mean? Your taunts, your intimidation.
Your bellowing war cries.
All of that is gone.
Yep.
Until you can recover it.
Yep.
Some of that is psychological.
Some of that's psychological, yeah. Just figure out. It's mostly about paying attention to your characters, paying attention to what makes them tick, what drives them, and then putting some sort of an obstacle in their way when you need a consequence.
Yep.
That is, like I said, proportional and related to the faux pas.
Yep. Moral dilemmas get a little bit more questionable.
This
I would
is my
say.
favorite consequence.
I think it's. I feel like moral dilemmas are a 202 kind of level because it isn't. For some people, it's easy to see.
That's true.
But you have to read the group to know what really is a moral dilemma. If you've got murder hobos and you bring the police against them, they're going to justify their actions. They're not going to... It's just going to roll right on. So, I feel like moral dilemmas is a stage up. It's that thing that if you can eventually figure out and you can make work, go for it. Because I feel that it is all of the pieces of the proportional, relatable, and meaningful all in one.
I think it's doubling down on the meaningful. So to kind of get what I had written this into our show sheet, and you're probably right. This probably is more of a 201 thing.
But I think it's a good thing to put at the end to say, this is something that fits within this.
In the moral dilemma is essentially putting a... and again, usually this only works in like narrative-heavy games.
Mm-hmm.
Is putting some sort of a consequence in there where choosing poorly doesn't have a direct consequence on the character other than it's obvious you made the wrong choice and you should feel bad about this.
Yeah.
For instance, my vampire plot with you. I handed you a magical sword that specifically killed undead.
Yep.
I told you that a great darkness was brewing in the city.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't tell you what it was.
Nope.
Didn't tell you what you needed to do about it.
Mm-mm.
But I handed you a magic undead slaying sword and told you, go solve the darkness in the city. You found out there were 2 vampires.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say right up to the very last moment, you were going to just smite everyone and let God sort them out.
I very much felt that way.
And one of them, I would say, was a good man.
Mm.
A good man who made a mistake.
Yeah.
And was honestly just trying to do right by the world. And you were about to kill him. And I was not going to stop you from doing that.
Mm-mm.
But I was going to make you feel incredibly crappy for having killed him.
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt. I think the other thing that you did was you read the room of the other players, of the situation, even my own moral dilemma, and stacked it so that it would be challenging to do.
Yeah.
Without it, I would have had to make a lot of other moral choices to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it would have had to have been a direct act with a lot of support.
Yeah, your party did not have your back on that one.
Nope. And there were guards, there were other people in the room.
What I had done on the contingency that you had decided to execute him was he handed a letter to his to the leader of the Mages Guild. Mm-hmm. And that letter essentially exonerated you of his murder, and basically said, like, yeah, I'm a vampire. I screwed things up. The blood of several people is on my hands. All of these are citizens that were in my charge. I accept this fate. So yeah, don't punish him for doing what probably should have been done a long time ago. Mm-hmm.
So there was weight on both sides,
and you'd have just lived with the fact that not only did you murder a good man, but he forgave you for it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And it would have changed my character drastically. It already has.
Oh yeah.
So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. But just saying, just throwing it out there. That's a consequence you can give people, is a guilty conscience.
Good luck with making that work, and do not feel bad if you can't figure that out.
That's true. That is a 201 thing.
It is a complex thing. It requires you to have complex characters and be invested in the story.
A lot of player buy-in. Yeah. A lot of player buy-in. And with you, I have that, so I knew I could pull it off.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So this is the end of our 101 series for this year.
Yeah.
It's kind of a big question mark of what we're going to do in the future. Are we going to continue the 101s? Are we going to move on to 201s? Or...
I will say we've had a lot of good feedback from our Discord, which is wonderful to see. I've been so happy that I've seen some great ideas. Some people have had some ideas for for what we should be doing next year. I kind of have some ideas. We've kind of went over a few of those together.
Yep.
Talking about, like, do we want to talk about altering themes of systems? Like in the case of Savage Seas, throwing Seventh Seas in Savage World.
Yeah, why are you moving it from one game system to another? What's the thought process there? How do you do it when you do it?
Right. Yeah, working with that setting, but there's just as much out there for other systems that would work the same way, and I think there's a lot of possibility that we could migrate in that direction. There seems to be quite a bit of interest.
Sure.
So I like that, and we always need help with what the community really is looking for. And I know it changes, it ebbs and flows. We've just gone through COVID where a lot of people weren't gaming, and now gaming is swinging back hard. OSR DMs are aplenty, but narrative DMs are not.
Yeah.
Hopefully our 101s helped people and got people moving into more narrative stories and kind of picked up on some of those things. What can we do to make that better? What can we talk about that other shows aren't talking about, or directions that we can focus in that you can help us with?
Yeah, like don't be shy either. Hit us up on any social media that we're present on. We always give like our Twitter and our Instagram stuff at the end of the show.
Our Instagram, by all means, DM us on Instagram if you've got stuff there. Throw stuff in comments, whatever. We see a lot of people join us on Instagram, and I would love to push out more content and help people there as well. If you're not comfortable with getting on Discord, because I know Discord is not for everyone. So I totally get that. Totally get that.
But to juxtapose that, we have had at least one user show up on Discord and was like, "Hi, I am specifically here to suggest a game system for you guys to review."
And it will go on the list.
It went immediately on the list. So
we love that. We absolutely love that.
If you want to just show up on our Discord and be like, "Hi guys, I will never talk here, but I wanted to drop you this one suggestion." Bye.
Yeah.
Hey, cool.
Thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you for dropping in. Thank you for the suggestion. Thank you for listening to the show.
We'd like to know where you came from and how you got to us and what we can do better. But
want to get to know
we will take what we can get from our silent community.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have questions, but I think we answered a lot of these.
All right, sure. You wanna quick review them? So killing a character. Is there a way to achieve the same purpose? Yeah, I think we kind of went over that.
Yeah. Was death and lethality like fingers on one hand? Can one be there without the other one?
Lethality essentially just means potential for death, so I don't think so.
I think the potential for death and the consequence of death are two different things. Because Seventh Sea has a potential for death. The consequence is death, is a specific situation. So yeah, I would say that they can be separate. I think they can be separated.
Yeah, okay.
As a new GM, how can I show lethality in the world?
Kill NPCs. This is actually
meaningful NPCs.
Kill meaningful NPCs. So one of my I saw a breakdown of how to put other adventuring groups in your game as essentially examples to your player parties.
Yeah.
Right. And one of those is the group that always fails before them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like on your way into the dungeon, you see them coming out of the dungeon, and they're like, you know, pulling one of their players or one of their members on a stretcher.
Mm-hmm.
You know, of like, oh wow, no, there's something big and scary in there. You guys shouldn't go in there. You know, learn from our failure. Don't go in there. You know, now they know that.
Yeah, one of the most successful ones I saw of that was a guy who basically hired the had a secret person of the king hire adventurers who they knew they had a name and a reputation because they'd done a few minor things, and that basically the session 0 and session 1 were their minor things to show that they were in the area. They were from other places, but they were in the area, and so he hires them, and literally every one of the adventures of the first 5 adventures that they go on, there are bodies and gear, and they're like, oh, this is cool. And then finally, adventure 4, they find the identical writ on the body of an adventurer, and the guy is not that old dead.
Oh,
and they realize that, he's just been sending squad after squad. And the money amount on that guy's is really not that much more than what they were making.
Oh,
and so the price has been going down, too.
Oh, that's rough.
Yeah.
Oh, that's rough.
Yeah. And I thought that was great that it showed lethality. There's a good chance we're not going to make it. We're real lucky is what's happening here. So
we talked about how to deal with character death.
Mm-hmm.
So a bad roll happens and it leads to unwanted character death. As a GM, what should I do? Should I save the character? Should I let it die? Yeah, we kind of talked about that.
Consequences.
That. Yep.
New person.
Oh yeah. J Gen X.
Yes. Consequences are meant to slow down or handicap the players in some way. Agreed. How can you create interesting or meaningful consequences for your players without it feeling too cheap? Falling flat on their face, or too harsh, getting seriously injured. It's about proportion. Look at what happened. What was the situation that they were in? What can you do proportionally that sits within that situation, like the gems, or the gold pouring out of his pocket?
Mm-hmm.
That's not a game mechanic, but it definitely has meaning to someone who values money.
Sure,
and it's something that could easily happen on that cliff face.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing too is without going too far, because I think that's probably the bigger fear is not how do I make it sting, but how do I make it not too far, you know. And I would say the first consideration you should always have is the playability of the character. Once that consequence is in place.
Yep.
You know, and this is why I've never liked the idea of a cleric losing their spells if they go against their god or something like that.
Yeah.
Always want to give that at least a handful of foreshadowing if you're going to pull something like that you are on the wrong path and your god isn't happy about it. You know, don't just have them wake up the next morning and not be able to cast spells, because that takes a cleric, and over something that may be a mystery to them, they may not even realize what they did wrong.
Yeah. It's definitely not proportional.
You have taken away the core mechanic of their and turned them into a crappy fighter. You know? And that's not fun. That's not fun for a player to just suddenly be missing half of your class features.
The one that got me was the, what is it? Nature abhors a vacuum. So the cleric drifts from his god. Someone steps in to take care of that and doesn't mind what they're doing. So their spells start changing. They go to do this smite or whatever, and it definitely goes off, but it also has an AoE that hits everyone.
Right.
And crackles with lightning, and you're like, which god are you praying to?
What, with lightning? I've never had lightning before. Mine has always been holy light. Right. But see, you started acting like you were a follower of the thunder god, so now he's paying attention to you instead of the god of light and healing.
Yeah, and he's a little bit okay with you doing a lot of murder.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because he's all about strength and challenge, and you are overcoming challenge after challenge after challenge. So here's your lightning, buddy.
Yep. So you're shifting. Some systems have clearly defined rules for the severity of a consequence. For example, a low roll or nat 1 in D&D, and consequence slots in Fate. How would you go about creating consequences for a system that don't have such rules, apart from something bad happens? I think you'd really have to... This is kind of a 202 level answer, because you have to look at the system to understand at what point do those consequences have meaning. If you're doing narrative consequences are always the better way to go.
Yeah.
Always the better way to go.
Because they're system agnostic, and they will hit a character. Usually narrative is where, especially if you're playing a narrative-heavy game, you've probably got a lot of buy-in from your players, and so narrative consequences for a narrative game are going to be where it's going to hurt most.
Yeah.
If you're playing narrative-heavy, they probably don't care about mechanics, and so coming up with mechanics that hurt them doesn't matter.
Yeah.
However, yeah, like you said, it's really dependent on the game system. Game systems will teach you how they want to be played.
Yep.
Okay. And so if you are looking for a mechanical detriment you can place upon them, look to the rules.
Yeah, and often what I would say is look to what the levels of success look like. Like, for instance, instead of setting a consequence, what does it take to get a good bonus? At this, like, advantage is a great example.
Sure.
People are like, oh, well, I'll just give them disadvantage. What does it take to get advantage? How important is advantage? What is the weight? Not necessarily the mechanical weight of advantage, but, like, how does it come out in the game, that concept of advantage? If it's really just a minor thing, disadvantage is not a bad mechanic to use.
Sure.
On the other hand, if you're just, like, you're at a penalty. Ooh. Like, penalties in Savage World are harsh.
Yeah. Yeah, when your target number is 4, a -1 is a big deal.
Yeah. And it's and then you get into larger ones where it's just like, oh, you lose a die.
Yeah.
No, don't start pulling dice out of their pool unless that is something that is reasonable within it. So, again, sometimes you have to look at what the advantages that give you things are to be able to retract those.
Yeah.
And don't steal from their narrative gifts. Don't steal bennies. Don't steal drama. Don't do those things.
Yes.
Those must stay on the table.
Agreed.
Even in these situations, because, again, a consequence should never be taken away from gifts that are openly given in that sense.
Yeah. And I would say, too, be very leery of, especially if you're going to permanently do it, do not remove anything the character has spent, like, points on. This is why, like, a lot of games, if you get, like, take, like, an edge or feat or, whatever, talent, that allows you to have, like, a pet or a magic item or something like that.
Yeah.
It will say specifically in the text of, like, if they lose it, they regain it at a later point for free.
Yep.
Because they spent a character build point of some sort on getting it.
Correct.
And you're essentially nerfing the character of an experience level if you take it away from them.
Yep. I agree with all of that. So we do have a system spotlight this month.
Yes.
But we have a science fiction double feature.
Sci-fi double feature. So they are both extraordinarily rules-light systems. Lasers and Feelings and Mothership.
But I feel like they're on the opposite ends of the spectrum. Like, it's a really weird narrative gap between them.
I haven't looked too hard at either of them, and I'm excited to do so.
Well, Lasers and Feelings, like it says, lasers and feelings. Those are the two gap points within that area. Whereas Mothership almost feels... I don't know how to put it. It almost feels like the simplified Paranoia. Or like, Starship Troopers thing, where it's like... bad things happen in the vacuum of space.
Yeah.
So expect that bad things are going to happen. But I'm excited. I'm excited that we get this sci-fi double feature.
Absolutely. All right. Well, you can find us on Twitter at @ST_conclave. Listen to us live on, find us on Instagram at @ST_conclave. Listen to us live every Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Time on mixlr.com/storyteller-conclave. And like we mentioned before, go ahead and join us up on our Discord. Shoot us some suggestions. We really haven't put a lot of stuff on our calendar for next year, so we are very suggestible right now.
It's going to be a busy, busy month.
It's going to be a busy month, man. You can find that link to our Discord on our Twitter or our website, storytellerconclave.com.
We'd like to thank our Patreon members who help us out every single month bringing this show to you, especially our name members, Knox in the Box, Subjet Sam, the Arcane Asylum, Sparkle Motion, Veteran, Hulavu, and Sean. We really appreciate the support. Our pre-show music is by Arcane Anthems. You can find them at patreon.com/arcaneanthems or on Instagram. The guy's been producing a lot of content. Our intro music is Beyond the Warriors by Geefrog. You can find that at geefrog.bandcamp.com. You can I'm losing it. Our outro music is Only Our Footprints in the Sand by Midair Machine. You can find that at freemusicarchive.org.
And a big shout out as always to our families, Vicky and Sean. Thank you so much for loving and supporting us. All of our friends who've sat with us at our tables to give us these great stories to share with you over the years. And you, every single one of our listeners. We love you guys so much.
Love you guys. Good night.